Pain and Gain could easily get lost in the plethora of explosion-heavy films that Michael Bay had become known for, but it's different. Pain and Gain is Michael Bay's magnum opus. Based on the true story of the Sun Gym gang, led by Daniel Lugo, the gang kidnapped, tortured, and extorted money from a wealthy businessman named Victor Kershaw. The plan involves stealing Kershaw's wealth, but it spirals so out of control that you wouldn't even think that it's based off a true story. So much so that the movie literally breaks the fourth wall to remind you that it's still a true story. It stars The Rock, Mark Wahlberg, and Anthony Mackie stepping out of their comfort zones to deliver the best work of their careers that Michael Bay somehow got out of them. Michael Bay suggests that this isn't a passion project and explains it as more of just the cool script that was sitting on the shelf for 12 years, which was actually written by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, who actually went on to write Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. Yet, it's clear that Michael Bay poured his heart into making this film, cutting back from a $195 million budget with Transformers Dark of the Moon to a $26 million budget, and even filming some scenes with GoPros. Michael Bay, The Rock, and Mark Wahlberg took smaller salaries in order to make the budget work. At its core, Pain and Gain is a character study about the American dream gone wrong. The idea that anyone can achieve success, consuming someone so much that they want to see other people lose what they have for their own personal gain. Our main character, Daniel Lugo, sees the world split into two types, people who do and people who don't. And the only way to get ahead is by holding other people back. Unlike movies like The Wolf of Wall Street, where it's easy to misunderstand the movie's themes and sensationalize the life of criminals, Pain and Gain isn't afraid to tell you that its main characters are stupid and that they're terrible people. Michael Bay wants the viewers to laugh at this misinterpretation of the American dream. The downside of that is that the audience really doesn't have anyone to root for, except for the victims who this movie doesn't really follow. There are no heroes, it's essentially bad guys doing bad things. But I'm on board with it. I love 3 of the Transformers movies. I love Bad Boys. I love Ambulance. I haven't seen The Rock, but I heard it's good. But Pain and Gain is Michael Bay's magnum opus. It's the testosterone-filled, sweaty, muscular, meathead film that you would kind of expect from Michael Bay, but done in the best way possible. And I want to walk through this movie and explain why I love it. So be a doer, get a pump, and come walk with me as we delve through Pain and Gain. So despite being the big explosion guy, I wanted to point out that Michael Bay is a very talented filmmaker. In 1980, at 15 years old, he was interning for George Lucas and helped with the storyboards for Raiders of the Lost Ark. Even in some of the Transformers movies, hidden among the robots and explosions are some fantastic-looking films. For better or worse, when you see a Michael Bay film, you know it's a Michael Bay film. I'm pointing this out because there are a number of shots in this film that I'm going to point out that have a lot more than meets the eye going on in them. Our movie opens with Daniel Lugo, played by Mark Wahlberg, screaming at the audience, "I'm hot, I'm big," as he's just this tiny guy against a billboard with a muscular man on it. He's just a man with aspirations much bigger than him. Steve Jablonsky, a longtime collaborator with Michael Bay, did the score for this movie. This piece particularly is both inspirational and reflective in a way. Like, it gives the vibe that we've been on a long journey, which is fitting because this is actually the events that are at the end of the film. It's June 17th, 1995, and Daniel Lugo is being raided by the Miami police. He even jumps off a second-story balcony into a dumpster to escape. He's Daniel Lugo, and he believes in fitness. Just a heads up, there's a lot of narration in this film. We're told the events of this film are unfortunately a true story that took place from October 1994 to June 1995. I'm not really going to spend a whole time talking about how the story differs from the actual crimes that took place because I don't really judge the movie based off of that, but I will post links to some videos that have talked about the crimes. If you're interested, I'll post them down below. The narration that Daniel Lugo gives helps us understand his mindset throughout these events. He's a fitness trainer at Sun Gym, saying we all start out equal. Most people don't develop to their full potential. The United States is great because if you put in the work, you can do anything. So yeah, some blatant USA propaganda from Michael Bay, which is something else he's been heavily criticized for, but it actually does play into the story, so stick with me. All of Lugo's heroes are self-made. Rocky, Scarface, and the guys from The Godfather. It's only fitting that he looks up to characters in movies based on what he eventually does to try to achieve success and wealth. It's not working hard like he says, but it's through over-the-top comedic kidnapping and extortion. He thinks people who squander their gifts are sickening, and even worse, unpatriotic. He even sees his job as a trainer as just a job to give people security and motivation. His new client is Victor Kershaw. Kershaw brags about his success, a self-made man who made a lot of money. Kershaw goes as far as to mispronounce Lugo's name. What makes Daniel Lugo an interesting character is that he has the same aspirations most people have. He's working for someone who is much more successful than he is. He's tired of being a slave to the system that feeds him crumbs. But he just has an ambitious way of trying to get his piece of success. For example, we see him say in his interview at the gym that he'll triple their memberships in 3 months or he'll quit. Even admitting to past crimes and saying that he deserves to be free because he's a hard worker and deserves a second chance. Also, the American flag is conveniently hovering behind him, like the American dream is just mocking him. Sun Gym did end up tripling their memberships. One thing they did was give free memberships to strippers, which is a benefit for Lugo. Despite the success of the gym, Lugo still lives in a small, crappy house. When working with Victor Kershaw, Kershaw notices his vanilla cologne and brags about not paying his taxes. Kershaw tries to hook him up with his accountant, and Lugo says maybe, the famous words of someone who isn't about to do anything. And Kershaw says that he thought Lugo was a definitely guy. Some Sears product placement here shows us a fake lawn saying to mow like a millionaire, and is actually a unique way of telling us that Lugo's American dream is just a fake idea of something that people strive for. And Lugo talks down to a Sears employee as if he's better than him. When Lugo tells his co-worker Adrian, played by Anthony Mackie, that they deserve better, the American flag is once again hovering behind them. This is the first time we see how convincing Lugo is. He inspires Adrian to want more. Adrian says that he's done making tacos, and he's putting his beef in their tacos, and I'll let you decide what that means. But Adrian is a steroid user, so this is a hint that he's willing to take shortcuts to get where he wants. Meet Johnny Woo, based off Tom Vu. He says every person in America is a doer or a don'ter. He's a motivational speaker who gives very basic advice but is convincing enough to have people pay to listen to him because Lugo says he understands him. Johnny Woo even singles him out and gives him his own training session. Johnny Woo's 3-finger plan is to get a goal, get a plan, and get up off your ass. Lugo misinterprets this and gets his own plan. Find a guy with money, make him give him everything he owns, and make America a better place and leave the guy broke and clueless. Also, I don't know what the hell Michael Bay is getting at with this Apocalypse Now type shot here, but I love it. It looks silly and awesome at the same time. Conveniently enough, Victor Kershaw is a rich man who Lugo can steal from, and Adrian is the perfect sidekick for Lugo. Adrian is tired of not being able to pay his rent on time, and he's tired of taking big girls out to dinner and worrying about them ordering dessert. By the way, Adrian's love for big girls is an ongoing thing in this movie. But they need another operative. Meet Paul Doyle, played by The Rock. Dwayne Johnson has kind of become a running joke in Hollywood as someone who plays the same role over and over again, which hopefully is changing soon, but Michael Bay somehow got him to step out of his comfort zone and embrace this insane character. Southland Tales, The Rundown, and Pain and Gain are the only movies I could think of off the top of my head where he kind of wasn't just phoning it in. The Rock actually almost stepped away from this role because he said he wasn't able to pull it off, but Michael Bay told him the story of Will Smith claiming that Michael Bay made him a movie star, and it drew The Rock back in. He put his trust in Michael Bay to direct him and pull it off, and it worked. It's definitely my favorite performance by him unless we're including the final boss run in WWE. Paul Doyle is having a hard time finding a job due to his criminal record. Lugo tells him it doesn't mean he's not entitled to a piece of the pie. It's also worth noting that Mark Wahlberg is huge in this movie, but The Rock dwarfs him. The Rock looks like he ate Rocky Maivia. Now it's Paul Doyle's time to do voiceovers.
Know why habit rhymes with rabbit? Because your whole life disappears down a bunny hole.
Paul did drugs, got arrested for a B&E, and found God while he was in prison. He now saves all of God's creatures. These GoPro shots in the prison fight are great, and I also love how he fights Kurt Angle here like it's an episode of SmackDown in 2000. Also, the guy that Paul saved in this prison fight scene turns him in. Like, what's up with that? The church towering over him in this shot is a contrast of the American flag towering over Lugo earlier. While Lugo is consumed by the American dream, Doyle is consumed by religion. Lugo has become a friend to Paul, something he hasn't had in a while, which would make him a prime candidate to drag him into this nonsense. I don't know how true this is, but it's worth sharing. Adrian says that breast milk is the real HGH and will make you swole, so use that advice as you will. Paul declines the offer for it, but if you're interested, more power to you. I'll be talking a lot about The Rock's delivery on these comedic lines in this film. I love how when Lugo mentions stealing money, he says, "You can't just do that, that's so illegal." Lugo tells him it's fear that's stopping him from wanting to help. Paul says, "Fear is false evidence appearing real," which is a Johnny Woo line. On the other hand, Adrian is quick to help Lugo. Despite never being involved in crime, he developed erectile dysfunction, and now he has a reason to get into the crime world. Rebel Wilson plays Ramona, Adrian's doctor, and she's going to see to it that Adrian starts working again, because she loves her chocolate-covered Raisinets, if you know what I mean. Paul has been staying at a church in Miami ran by Pastor Randy, who is also a recovering addict himself. Pastor Randy noticed that he's in a Michael Bay movie and notices the sweat glistening off Paul. He makes a move on him and mentions that he's buff, which causes Paul to snap and almost kill him. I'm different than Pastor Randy. I see how big The Rock is in this movie and I just want to do a push-up, not make a move on him. So, since things aren't working out at the church, he agrees to go along with Lugo's plan as long as no one gets hurt. Lugo says he's seen a lot of movies and he knows what he's doing. Once again, we're just dealing with an idiot who thinks he can do something because he's seen a fictional character do it. There's a very weird cut here while they're in the car where they needed to cut out some time where there's no dialogue, so it's like this bizarre hard cut of the car in one spot of the screen and then it just cuts to another spot. There's also a loud boom in the soundtrack during the cut. I don't know why they didn't just show B-roll of the car driving or something. I don't know, it's just weird. For some reason that really bothered me, I don't know why. So, we go to Johnson Firearms, where our group lies to Patrick from The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody about being a part of Tampa PD. When he asks for badges, Paul tells him they're part of security for Stryker, who is on tour in Jerusalem. This weird dry humor in this scene is what I love most about this movie. It's just so stupid. Like, it's just dumb people having a dumb conversation, and I love it.
People say Christian rock sucks.
Who says that?
Yeah.
Nobody. I mean, well, fucking assholes.
They get their merchandise to shock, incapacitate, and imprison their fellow man. The clerk even takes a taser. Gangster's Paradise plays over the montage of the group assembling the plan. Adrian even says that he knows Lugo is making everything up, but it didn't matter because they'd be rich. The first plan fails because Victor Kershaw is having Shabbat. The second plan, which by the way, the actual Sun Gang took 7 attempts to successfully kidnap their first victim, involves Paul dressing as a ninja and Adrian dressing as an alien. Also, take a shot every time you see a flag in this movie and I bet you'd already be drunk. They botched the second plan by getting the wrong BMW because Paul didn't check the license plate. If you really needed to know that literally every character is a horrible person, Victor Kershaw himself is yelling at a couple of his employees for being overweight and having acne. So, the victim in this movie is even a piece of garbage. Adrian, who is now worthy of being the ninja, tases Victor Kershaw, and they're able to kidnap him. Also, some advertising for useacondom.com is on this billboard, so that's nice. Lugo uses a fake accent and tells Kershaw to tell his wife to take the kid and go to Colombia. She's not home, though, and Adrian gets too trigger-happy with the taser and knocks Kershaw out. Paul was assigned to Eagle's Nest and is distracted by the amount of, let's just say, toys in this warehouse. Like, it looks like something out of a Saw parody. Fun fact, $75,000 worth of these toys were stolen from the set. Now, I want to know who needs $75,000 worth of this stuff. Who is the freak? So, Kershaw is handcuffed to a chair. His narration says that he wouldn't give up. Despite the fake accent, Kershaw is able to identify Lugo by his cologne that he mentioned earlier. He says that he's broke because he never went to college, and it resulted in him obsessing over pectoral muscles. So pointing out Lugo's lack of success is an easy way of offending him. Lugo delivers the ultimate American line, and possibly the most important line in the movie, "I don't just want everything you have, I want you not to have it." The movie definitely seems like it takes a darker tone from this point on. The score gets darker, and Paul questions the plan, saying it was supposed to be easy, but the seriousness is broken by Lugo making Kershaw redo his answering machine, and Kershaw keeps exposing what's going on, saying he can't come to the phone because he's being held by Lugo. It's also worth pointing out that the code names for our group are Patriot 1, 2, 3, as if we needed more American symbolism. Paul is left to watch Kershaw while Lugo goes to work, and since Lugo is Kershaw's trainer, he even acts disappointed when he doesn't show up. Master planning. Paul, who is reading a Christian magazine and wearing a Jesus shirt, is probably a bad choice to expect merciless babysitting from. Kershaw begs for a drink, and him and Paul bond over both of their sobriety. Kershaw even using it as a way to try to get out, saying that maybe he's here to try to help Paul get through another day sober. Kershaw says that Paul is nicer than the other two guys because he defends them. Paul asks if Kershaw is a Jew, because he's Christian obviously, and then offers to help him and makes him accept Jesus. We jump ahead 6 days. Kershaw gets P on the policies, which Lugo doesn't want to happen because they'll flag it and say that Kershaw is, quote, incontinental, meaning incompetent. I also love how Lugo shows up to the warehouse as if he's going to do an actual job here. Also, there's an arch here that says the warehouse is the Garden of Eden. Kershaw chooses to call Paul Eldad, which means beloved by God in Hebrew. In return, Paul calls Kershaw Pepe. The movie breaks the fourth wall to tell us that Paul is the weak link of the group because he has befriended Kershaw, even calling him Pepe. Then breaks the fourth wall again to tell us that Serena, whom Lugo is with until he's not, is the new recruit. She's unfortunately written to be a stereotypical dumb blonde. Lugo lied about him being a music video director and says he's telling the truth now, that he works for the CIA and was actually recruiting her. I do wish Michael Bay was better at directing women. It's probably the biggest gripe I have with his work. Like, I know everyone in this movie is stupid, but she's even dumber than Paul. I don't know, it's kind of weird. But she says that she'll die for her adopted country. The Rock abandoned his Team Bring It shirt for a Team Jesus shirt, and Kershaw tries to escape, which makes Paul punch him in the face.
Jesus Christ himself has blessed me with many gifts. One of them is knocking someone the fuck out!
The Rock is just so freaking good in this. So, we are now at Operation Honeypot, and Serena, who thinks she's working for the CIA, now meets with Paul at the strip club, where all good CIA meetings take place. Frank Griga, who is the third richest man in Miami, takes Serena, which angers Paul. Paul didn't know who he was at the time, he just knew that Frank was a douche. Meanwhile, Adrian has stolen Kershaw's dog and gifted it to Ramona. And Lugo tortures Kershaw until he eventually signs the papers. But Kershaw needs to be present at the signing, and despite Lugo saying that Kershaw is overseas saving elephants, they can't approve it. Michael Bay does a lot of shots of looking up at characters, with the background looming over them as if these are small people overshadowed by something much bigger, kind of symbolizing the reason why the story is even happening. Small people in a much larger machine making other people successful. Meanwhile, John, the owner of Sun Gym, has lost the sponsorship for the first annual Mr. Miami. He happens to be a notary on the side, I guess, so Lugo uses Shalotsky's, which is Kershaw's restaurant, as a sponsor for Mr. Miami, which gets John to approve the notary. Got it? So, as Lugo tries to convince Paul to kill Kershaw, the main things in this shot are Lugo and Paul and unfinished, incomplete pillars. A not-so-subtle way of telling us that these characters are incomplete or flawed. Lugo threatens to kick Paul off the team if he doesn't finish the job, which, if you remember, the only thing Paul wanted were friends. So, Lugo is threatening to take the most important thing away from him, despite God, obviously. Also, Kershaw became a friend to him as well, so obviously he wouldn't want to kill him. Another major flaw in the plan is Lugo wants to get Kershaw drunk so that he doesn't recognize the guy's face who is going to get him on the plane and get him out of the country, which Paul sympathizes with because Kershaw and Paul are both sober. This results in Kershaw telling Paul that he's going to tell Jesus what he did, and Paul tells him, "You're not going to tell Jesus anything." So apparently mentioning Jesus is a soft spot. So that plan was a lie though, because they're getting Kershaw drunk so they can stage a drunk driving accident, not sneak him out of the country. Couple problems with the plan. One, Kershaw is Jason Voorhees and survives, and two, he mainly survived because Adrian was dumb enough to put Kershaw's seatbelt on. As dumb as Lugo is, it's amazing how he's actually the smartest of the group. Even Lugo says Adrian made a dumb mistake, so maybe he isn't the weak link after all, like the movie says. It's also nice to see that after this, Paul still calls Kershaw Pepe. So they set the car on fire, since this is a Michael Bay film, and there's an explosion, albeit a small one. I also love how Paul is like cowering from the explosion. Kershaw continues to be Jason Voorhees and survives the explosion. Lugo tries to convince Paul to run him over and put him out of his misery. Lugo is such a piece of garbage for talking Paul through this, and the gaslighting is just next level. Paul kinda grazes him, and Lugo tells him to back up and run him over again. They tease this very brutal head crush, but Kershaw's head is like pinned between the curbs, so the car doesn't crush his head fully. Paul has been so against killing the whole time, and Lugo refuses to take any responsibility for the death and tells Paul that he did it, not we did it. The past couple scenes are really doubling down on how unlikable this guy is. So Kershaw survived, and the detectives do not believe his claim because he's Colombian, and the story about the ninja bodybuilders kidnapping him is way too absurd to believe. The very large dildo and the baseball-sized anal beads lead them to think that this was just a sex thing that Kershaw was into. The whole warehouse and the car full of sex toys makes me think this movie was written by a 14-year-old, but on the other hand, I think it's hilarious. The Sun Gang, looking tough, feeling tough, have unfinished business now. I also love the shots of the sunglasses here where we see reflections of other characters. They actually do it a lot in this movie. Michael Bay and cinematographer Ben Saracen were in God mode during this movie. Kershaw calls private investigator Ed Dispose II, but Ed Dispose III answers, played by Ed Harris. The second died and the third is retired, and he doesn't believe Kershaw's claims either. The Sun Gang have taken on the persona of surgeons and hilariously have a hard time finding the ICU because the hospital has this stupid line director. You could also look at this as a metaphor for how they were never able to find their own way in the real world, or they're just idiots. Also, if you didn't know this was a comedy, Kershaw's roommate explodes in the bathroom, so that's nice. Lugo says that he's Kershaw's primary care physician, but Kershaw checked himself out against the doctor's orders. They think the police scared him out, and when Lugo is asked why he's dressed for a surgery, he likes to be prepared for anything, as if a surgery is going to break out anywhere. So, it seems like the gang is free to go. The situation with Kershaw perfectly sums up America. They didn't believe him because he's Colombian, and once he has nothing, no one cares about him. So The Rock used to wear $500 shirts in his old wrestling days. Nowadays he wears a vest to show his muscles, but he reused one of his old shirts in this scene where we see the guys flourishing with Kershaw's wealth. Serena is also Paul's girlfriend now, and Adrian is now capable of getting erections after his treatment, which Ramona puts to good use. The shots of Lugo by the sky remind me of the fake sky that he was in front of at Sears, which could be intentional because this lifestyle he's living is fake. So Adrian gets engaged and buys a house with Ramona. Paul is with Serena and relapses and starts doing cocaine, and Lugo is just happy with the material things in life. At least the other two are trying to build a life with someone. Lugo is just a selfish waste of space. Dispose, who will become a major character over an hour in, decides to come out of retirement to help Kershaw because what the Sun Gang did to him is un-American. So I mean, despite them wanting to achieve the American dream, the authorities deem them un-American, which is ironic. Lugo uses the name Tom Lawn when talking to Arwen from The Sweet Life. We just need Esteban next. Lugo has ultimately achieved his goal from earlier when he was sitting in the lawnmower at Sears. He literally said, "I just want a big fat lawn that I can mow until the sun goes down." But we'll find out that that isn't enough. Lugo is supposed to be coaching kids on basketball, but he takes it too seriously. But we do get a lesson on the film's title, Pain and Gain. It's supposed to hurt. Your cells remember when it hurts, and that's when they get strong. The personal trainer's coming out of him, but he actually does feel dangerous in this, which is a nice character development. Also, once he gets into the rich neighborhood, the only people he has any type of control over are kids. He brags about dating Serena and giving her to Paul, and even threatens one of the kids by saying he'll be their stepdad in a week. Dispose is on the case though, taking pictures of the group, watching over them, questioning where and how they spent their money. We also learn that since Kershaw wasn't a nice guy to literally everyone, that no one reported him missing or even cared. They were kind of just happy that he was gone. His former employees even like Lugo because of the front he puts on and his persuasive ways. Lugo is putting on the front that he works for the CIA and forms a neighborhood watch. Paul is going through withdrawals and needs to sneak behind the board to do a line. In a role-playing exercise, a lot of men are quick to volunteer to assault Serena, which is unfortunate. Arwen gets to do the honors, though. We're definitely seeing Paul's downward spiral, which The Rock actually does a great job at portraying. Lugo complains about him not blending in, and Paul says that the kumbaya shit that Lugo is doing isn't necessary. The cracks are starting to show with the gang. Paul even tries to cover up the fact that he's on the floor with white stuff on his nose by saying that he was just praying. I love the way Serena's voice distorts as she's talking to really highlight how Paul is functioning. The movie does this weird thing here where it hints that Paul jumps off the balcony. Like, Paul's narration says that he hit rock bottom and he had no choice but to take the fast way down or find a way to keep climbing. Then it cuts. So I don't know if the fact that he's still alive is supposed to be a twist, but he's still alive nonetheless. Ed Du Bois meets with Kershaw, who is staying at a motel worse than the one in the Florida project, and decides to go to the source and hires Lugo as his personal trainer. Ed kind of plays Lugo's game against him, using Johnny Woo's quotes to win him over. Ed says that he works in lawn and garden, and he becomes Lugo's new favorite client. The narcissistic traits show here where Lugo likes him the more his ego is fed. Ed also plants some seeds where he says that he's friends with Kershaw and couldn't get a hold of him. Meanwhile, like I said, Paul is still alive. He says he's been here before and he's not proud of it, both with the addict tendencies and the fact that he steals money. The cut here has me believing that Michael Bay is telling us to laugh at the movie because we're seeing Paul get shot at by the police, and it cuts to Ramona and Adrian's wedding where the audience is literally laughing. So I had no idea that banks do this, but when Paul opens the bag of money that he steals, an ink bomb goes off with the intention of ruining the stolen money. It also looks like Paul was slimed on Nickelodeon, but he assures us that this plan was just practice, and he has a follow-up plan involving Frank Griga from the club earlier. I've always loved this underwater scene here, just so well shot with the bullets flying past him, and the shot of his toe getting hit always makes me cringe. So Paul is green, wet, and without a toe, so what better time to attend the wedding of Adrian and Ramona? Lugo uses religion against Paul once again when he asks if they can reattach his toe, saying that God gave him 10, he's missing 1, so he has to deal. Now he has 9. So Paul blew his cut of money by putting it up his nose, and now he wants to take Griga's money. Lugo has finished the initial mission and wipes his hands of it, and doesn't want to help Paul with this one. Adrian, however, needs to pay off his house and get his erectile dysfunction fixed, so he's down. The recruiter is struggling to be recruited. Kinda ironic. So Kershaw calls the Sun Gym and reveals that he wants his money back. John, who notarized the papers, says that he was also scammed by Lugo as well, not taking any responsibility for signing the papers. Lugo Star 69's Kershaw and finds the motel that he's at. John also thinks that Star 69 is a sex act, which is hilarious. So Kershaw has escaped from the motel, and the little person who works at the motel interrupts them, and Lugo yells, "Snatch that cabbage patch," which is something I think I'm going to start saying. We really don't give The Rock enough credit for how he's able to go through with this withdrawal performance to this performance where he threatens to smash the receptionist's head in with a bat. There's so many different performances here kind of just jammed into one, and they're really asking a lot of him in this movie, and he nailed it. So, while Paul is with the receptionist, Lugo discovers Du Bois' ID and figures that he's involved with helping Kershaw. Adrian, of all things, says he's going to shit in Du Bois' bathroom. Du Bois, in the meantime, reports his finding to the Miami Police Department, rightfully so. He says that if these guys are still out there, they'll do it again. As Adrian and Lugo go to Du Bois' home, we see that the police are actually escorting Du Bois' home, so the mission has to be aborted. But Kershaw left a message sarcastically thanking him for letting the gang get to his motel, which in reality is Kershaw's own fault for calling them, so I don't know what he was expecting. Lugo and Adrian just jump in the water despite Adrian saying he can't swim. I'm not really sure where they go, and they never really say. We also learn how offended Lugo is about Du Bois' betrayal because, like squandering your potential, breaking the bond between a trainer and his client is un-American. Lugo is beginning to spiral, even turning on his motivational god, Johnny Woo. He learned that if you don't pay attention to every detail, it can bite you in the ass. It's also as simple as, if they were good at what they were trying to do and actually killed Kershaw, they'd be set. Just dumb people doing dumb things. But Lugo refuses to go backwards. Johnny Woo's three-finger plan just needs another finger. The plan is to trick Frank Griga, who runs a phone sex company, and get him to invest in their plan to spread to India. Honestly, I don't know why this wasn't the initial plan, because it's actually not bad, but the presentation reminds me of the ones from Impractical Jokers, because they mistakenly used Japanese people instead of Indian people, and there's a photo of Adrian's wife just in the middle of it. It's just so stupid. Ultimately, they're going to redo everything they did with Kershaw to Griga. The ultimate American way: if you can't get it yourself, just take it from someone else. They meet at Adrian's place, where Griga is skeptical about investing with them because they seem very unprofessional, and he even says that Lugo isn't a hard worker. Also, I love the dance party going on in the other room where The Rock is just doing push-ups in the middle of it. So calling Lugo an amateur is apparently something you should never call him because he punches Griga for it. There's masterful camera work here where the camera is like hovering from the bedroom to the living room dance party and back. It's as if Michael Bay took offense to the criticism that he's just the explosion guy and went nuts in this. So Lugo punches Griga, which knocks him back, and a weight falls onto his head and kills him. The way the music swells and the way his girlfriend Christina finds him, it's almost like it's a horror movie. Wildly one of the best sequences in the entire film. They attempt to sedate Christina after she starts biting Paul for holding her down. Mark Wahlberg's whimpering and recap of the events is also hilariously great. And luckily the dog escapes. It's also very ironic that the person they tried to kill lived and they accidentally killed the person that they were going to keep alive. Lugo is still trying to get the combination for Griga's safe from Christina, and amongst all the chaos, he needs to get a pump. A line I always think of when I'm in a stressful situation, and The Rock's quiet, "Yeah, take a moment," is just perfect. Paul's attempt to sympathize with Lugo fails, as he says when he almost killed someone, the guy lived. So Lugo must really feel like shit. So Lugo and Paul are going to try to get into Griga's safe, and Adrian is left with the bodies and the mess, which Lugo just says to blame on the dog. Like, yeah, the dog left all this blood on the floor. I can't wrap my head around why The Rock's scenes are like this. It happened at Adrian's house and now at Griga's, where he'll be standing in the background and his mouth won't move and he has ADR. Like, I don't know why he didn't just say the lines while he was there. Anyway, the combination that Christina gave them doesn't work. Christina wakes up and Adrian tranquilizes her again while he's supposed to be getting the real combination from her, and unfortunately he accidentally kills her before she's able to give them the code. So, 2 dead bodies now. Adrian's description, saying the bitch is cold bro, her soul has left her body, is phenomenal. Lugo and Adrian are having a breakdown, and Paul is just kind of patiently waiting in the background for the code. Blaze of Glory is such a great song to play as the movie kind of begins to wrap up. Paul also feeds Griga's Chihuahua his toe that he lost earlier after Lugo says it's a Yorkshire. So they load Griga and his girlfriend into the van. It's like the most chaotic van ride I've ever seen. Paul is complaining about the bodies tipping over. Lugo is complaining because Paul is complaining. Adrian is complaining about what his wife is going to think about this. There's police outside, bodies in boxes, it's wild. So Paul is told to stay in the warehouse with the bodies while Lugo and Adrian go to Home Depot to get supplies. Lugo says since this was Paul's plan, then he needs to start taking responsibility. It's all about blaming others, but also taking the prize for Lugo. That seems to be his thing. Paul is sure of life after death, but he's also sure that dead people don't need their stuff, like he does. I've genuinely never seen someone go on a shopping trip and look like a bunch of criminals like I've seen here. Just look at all the stuff Lugo and Adrian are buying. So there's a bunch of dog findings going on here. Adrian's dog is found, but is revealed to be stolen, which we already knew, and Paul's toe is found since he gave it to the Chihuahua. The fourth wall break here that shows us the side effects of cocaine while Paul is randomly working out in the middle of this chaos after raiding the dead bodies is just great. He says he feels like shit, so I guess if he needed to make sense as to why Paul is acting like this, that's why. Mark Wahlberg strips down to his Calvin Kleins like it's the 90s again, and it's time to dispose of these bodies. Adrian and Lugo look ridiculous in these shower hats. It's just hilariously great. I guess this part is the main point of criticism for this movie because this is a true story, keep in mind, and the movie makes it a big joke as they're disposing and cutting up these bodies. Like they argue over the chainsaw being a piece of garbage because it's made in China and not America. Lugo tells Adrian he should have bought the same brand as his stupid Sears lawnmower from earlier. I guess if you can get past the fact that this is a true story and that these are supposed to be real people, this scene is comedic gold. I totally understand why some people are uncomfortable during this, but I can kind of get past that. So Paul's given the important task of grilling the fingerprints off. And you can't tell me this isn't a stupid pun by Michael Bay based off of The Rock's catchphrase, "If you smell what The Rock is cooking." There's very undercooked, no pun intended, story about the Miami Police Department and their incompetence. They go to Dispose and say that they think Griga and Christina were kidnapped by the Sun Gang. Dispose earlier warned them that they would get hungry again if they weren't caught, pun intended, and we cut to The Rock cooking. So you can't tell me that this isn't a genius pun by Michael Bay. There's too much cooking going on in this scene for it to not be intentional. If Adrian and Lugo didn't look suspicious enough buying the stuff, they returned the chainsaw with blood and hair in it. The blood drips in a way I don't think is possible, but it lands on the cashier's apron. So The Rock is cooking the hands, and we get to my favorite fourth wall break of all time. Genuinely nothing will ever top this for me. This is still a true story. This movie has gone so far off the rails that Michael Bay felt the need to break the fourth wall to remind us that this stuff actually happened. It's wild. So the neighbors are watching and probably wondering what the smell is, but it got smoky inside, so what do you expect Paul to do? I know Lugo is technically the main character, but Paul is the star of this movie, and The Rock needs to do more stuff like this. He says in AA they teach you to sit with your feelings. Look under the bed and see for yourself that there's no monsters under there. But the problem is, sometimes the monster is there, and sometimes you just gotta fucking run. So Paul has realized how far they've gone, and came to the decision to run. He leaves a note apologizing and saying maybe God will forgive them. So Lugo complains about Paul's lack of accountability, which also Lugo obviously does not have. I think Paul does have accountability, like he has owned up to doing these crimes the whole time. Lugo is the one who keeps blaming others. Lugo and Adrian dump the dead bodies into the swamp, and we cut to the police department, who are planning to take down the gang. This time the flag looms over the police. The flag went from a sign of criminal activity, as it followed the gang through most of the movie, to an incompetent police force. They ultimately do get their arrests, and they do get the job done, but had they have believed Kershaw, Griga and Christina wouldn't be dead. We catch up to where we saw Lugo at the beginning of the movie, doing sit-ups at the billboard when the police arrive. Paul had gone back to the church where he is found. John was doing his Mr. Miami competition. Adrian and Ramona are arrested at their house. And Lugo actually ends up escaping on Kershaw's boat after he outruns the police, and Kershaw suspects that he's going to the Bahamas where Kershaw has more money. Right on cue, he's found attempting to drain and close the accounts. For the second time, he jumps off a balcony and gets hit by a car. This time, the car is one that Kershaw is driving, and this time he's taken out and brought into custody. It's worth noting that even after being arrested by Dispose, Lugo is still worried about fitness and talks about how he could have actually helped Dispose get ripped. Lugo is also amazed at the police waiting for him back in America, and you get the vibe that he still feels accomplished despite being caught, because at the end of the day, he's a doer who did what he strived to do. We see how bizarre the trial was. Serena says that she's going to quit the CIA and become a movie star, which we see that she does not become a movie star. Ramona testifies against her now ex-husband Adrian and says that he has erectile dysfunction and he's unfaithful. The barrels with Griga and Christina's bodies were found, and Christina was identified by the serial number on her breast implants, the first time in history that this ever happened. Paul ended up confessing to everything and says that Lugo is a master manipulator. They promised him that no one would get hurt, but they hurt his friend Pepe. For this, he's only given 15 years in prison. Lugo and Adrian were guilty on all charges. Dispose tells us that they weren't found guilty on the thing that they were most guilty for, being dumb, stupid fucks. Lugo and Adrian were sentenced to death. At the end of the day, Lugo only wanted what everyone else had. Just a person tired of being held down by a system that feeds him crumbs. Something a lot of people can relate to. His mission was justified, but his actions to achieve the mission definitely were not. And he even admits to wanting to be better than everyone, which is a recipe for injury.
I wanted to be better then. And that's a recipe for injury. That doesn't mean you give up, though.
He looks up at an American flag hanging outside of the prison fence, now forever out of his reach. So Pain and Gain was released on April 26, 2013 to mixed reviews. Mark Kermode described the film as grotesquely inappropriate and every bit as pumped up as the appalling characters it is attempting to portray. Rolling Stone said, Bay once claimed he wanted to make a small personal film that would reveal the real Bay, and I'm here to report that Pain and Gain is that film. It's dumb, shallow, and deeply cynical. Like I've said at length already, I believe the intent was to show dumb people doing dumb things, so I think the criticism actually proves Michael Bay accomplished his goal in making this. Pain and Gain debuted at #1 in the box office, but in the following weeks it was buried by Iron Man 3 and The Great Gatsby. Ironic that a DiCaprio film buried this, because I also think The Wolf of Wall Street buried it as the best dark comedy based on a true story from that same year of 2013. A lot of movies I talk about were flops, but this movie actually grossed $87 million on a budget of $26 million. Definitely low for Michael Bay, who was in the midst of his Transformers movies, but still a big success for a standalone film. He even brought back Mark Wahlberg to be in the next 2 Transformers movies. One I think is pretty good, and the other not so much. Aside from Michael Bay going God mode in this movie and proving he knows how to make a sort of Coen Brothers type character study, The Rock is definitely the standout of Pain and Gain. He can really act and put on a great performance despite what his track record shows. I've said it when I talked about Southland Tales, it's really unfortunate that he won't step out of his comfort zone more often. I never really touched upon the real Pain and Gain murders, so I'll link a couple cool videos that I've seen about the real crimes below. I know the events are exaggerated, but Pain and Gain is a dark comedic reminder of the lengths some will go to achieve the American dream, and I think it pulls it off perfectly. In a way, its weird comedic exaggeration to send that message mirrors the idiotic things that these guys do to achieve the American dream, if that makes sense. So let me hear your thoughts on this wild comedic masterpiece. I gotta get a pump.